We are stealing it tomorrow. Your father rewrote the deed. If you dare protest, you can sleep in the barn." That was the exact voice of my mother, ringing through the speaker of my phone on my very first night in my new mountain lodge. My hands actually trembled holding the device. But instead of caving in like I always did, I smiled. I prepared a surprise. By sunrise, new high-security locks were installed, and armed deputies were waiting for them. Thank you for watching the video. Before I take you back there, do me one small favor. Take a second to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you are. It helps more than you know. My name is Harlan. I am 35 years old, and for 15 years, I was the invisible bank account for my family. I had recently resigned from my position as Vice President of Operations for a national logistics firm. I spent my days mitigating corporate disasters, calculating massive financial risks, and optimizing supply chains. It was a brutal, demanding career that paid incredibly well, but left me entirely drained of color and life. I took my life savings and purchased a $5 million custom mountain estate in the remote wilderness of Montana. I paid in cash. I wanted absolutely nothing but the profound silence of the pine trees and the icy chill of the mountain air. I had barely unpacked a single box. I was sitting on my leather sofa, staring out at the frozen lake, finally breathing without the crushing weight of family expectations. Then, the phone rang. It was my father, Mercer. My mother, Sybil, and my older brother, Blaine, were on speakerphone in the background. They did not ask how my drive was. They did not ask if I was settling in. They simply announced their invasion. Blaine, the undisputed golden child of the family, laughed his signature arrogant laugh. He told me they had packed a moving truck and were coming to claim the main house. Mercer, with his absolute, tyrannical authority, claimed he had already handled the paperwork to transfer my property into their names. I hung up the phone. The sheer audacity of their words hung in the profound silence of the room. I felt a sudden, icy calm wash over me. To understand the absolute entitlement of my family, you have to understand the empire of lies they built on my back. When I was 18 years old, I worked double shifts at a greasy diner to save up for a used pickup truck. It was my only ticket to freedom. One morning, I woke up, and the truck was gone. Mercer had sold it. He took my money and used it as a down payment for a luxury sports car for Blaine. When I confronted him, his face remained completely cold. "Family first, Harlan," he demanded. "You can take the bus." Sybil was no better. She was a master of the weeping guilt trip. When I earned a full academic scholarship to an out-of-state university, Sybil hid the acceptance letter in her closet. She cried endless, manipulative tears, claiming that my leaving would utterly shatter Blaine's fragile self-esteem because he had just dropped out of community college. I stayed behind. I worked. I funded their delusions. Blaine was a serial entrepreneur who never actually worked a day in his life. 3 years ago, he started a luxury car rental business that was nothing more than a front to fund his lavish lifestyle. When he inevitably defaulted on his shady loans, dangerous men started showing up at my parents' house. Sybil came to my apartment, collapsed on my floor, and threatened to harm herself if I did not save her golden child. I liquidated my stock portfolio and paid $60,000 to clear Blaine's debts. Loyalty in a toxic family is nothing more than a down payment on your own destruction. Sitting in my $5 million sanctuary, I realized they were never going to stop. They thought I would bow my head and accept my role as the sacrificial lamb. Little did they know, the terrified boy they raised was gone. They had just targeted a vice president of operations who specialized in neutralizing catastrophic liabilities. I did not panic. I opened my laptop and called my commercial real estate attorney, Thea. It was 10 o'clock at night, but she answered immediately. Thea was a woman of immense intellect, completely cold and fiercely protective of her clients. I explained the threat. I explained Mercer's claim about the deed. Send a written notice of no trespass to all 3 of them immediately, Thea instructed, her voice entirely professional. Keep it brief. I am logging into the state database right now. I sent the text messages. Blaine responded with a laughing emoji. Mercer responded with a demand that I have coffee ready by 9 in the morning. They walked willingly into the snare. 10 minutes later, Thea called me back. Her normally calm demeanor was replaced by a staggering intensity. "They are not just moving in, Harlan," Thea said slowly. "Look at your email. I am sending you a link right now. I opened the document. My blood froze. It was a state business registration for a company called Summit Peak Estates, LLC. The registered address was my new mountain lodge. The registered agent was Blaine. They had attached a corporate entity to my home before I had even slept in the master bedroom. Keep looking, Thea ordered. The next link was a high-end luxury vacation rental website. There, under Blaine's profile, was my house. He had listed the property for premium holiday bookings. The calendar was entirely blocked out in red for the next 6 months. Thea accessed the back-end analytics of the platform. Blaine had already collected $85,000 in fraudulent booking deposits from innocent families. But the sheer magnitude of their betrayal did not stop there. Thea had run a deep financial monitor on my social security number. Blaine had used the LLC and my physical address to apply for a $250,000 commercial business loan. He forged my signature as the absolute financial guarantor. They did not just want a free place to live. They were planning to establish physical residency, hold my property hostage under squatters' rights, and use my pristine credit to fund a $250,000 fraud scheme. If they crossed my threshold, I would be legally trapped. They believed they had executed the perfect crime against an easy target. They had no idea they were walking blindly into a federal trap. We go to war, Thea stated clearly. Fortify the house. Do not sleep. At midnight, I paid an exorbitant fee to an emergency commercial locksmith. He arrived in a panel van and replaced every single exterior deadbolt on the estate with high-security, electronic keypads. While he drilled through the heavy wood, I mounted 3 high-definition security cameras around the perimeter. I ensured the audio recording function was perfectly clear. I wanted every lie captured on digital tape. At 3 in the morning, I called the county sheriff's dispatcher. My name is Harlan, I stated, using my most authoritative corporate voice. I am reporting an impending trespassing incident directly connected to an active $250,000 wire fraud and identity theft case. The suspects have stated in writing that they intend to breach my property at 9 in the morning to establish fraudulent residency. Using the exact legal terminology changed everything. The dispatcher did not treat it as a civil family dispute. She flagged it as an active commercial crime. I spent the final hours of the night preparing my ammunition. I created 3 distinct folders on my kitchen island. The red folder contained my certified property deed and title insurance. The blue folder contained the state LLC registration, the fraudulent rental listings, and the credit bureau alerts. The black folder contained exactly 15 years of bank statements, highlighting every single dollar I had ever transferred to my family. At 8 in the morning, Thea arrived in a sleek sedan, carrying a leather briefcase. At exactly 9:45, the heavy crunch of gravel echoed through the mountain air. A massive moving truck pulled into my private driveway, followed closely by Mercer's polished SUV. I watched the security feed on my tablet. The predators had arrived to claim their prize. Mercer stepped out of the vehicle first. He puffed out his chest, placing his hands on his hips as he surveyed the massive timber architecture. He looked exactly like a reigning king inspecting his newly conquered territory. Blaine sauntered out next, wearing designer sunglasses he absolutely could not afford, twirling a useless set of old keys around his finger. Finally, Sybil emerged. She was carrying a freshly baked pie, wearing a sickeningly sweet smile. She was preparing to wear the mask of the loving mother. Blaine walked up the heavy wooden steps to the front porch. He shoved his key into the door. It did not turn. He jammed it harder, his arrogant smile faltering. He began to pound his fists against the solid oak. "Open the door, Harlan," Blaine shouted, his voice echoing off the trees. "The movers are charging by the hour. Get out here." I smoothed the front of my shirt. I was completely cold. I unlatched the heavy deadbolt, opening the door just enough to keep the security chain fully engaged. "You are trespassing," I said flatly. Sybil immediately stepped forward, holding up the pie, her mask slipping into an expression of wounded victimhood. "Harlan, sweetie, do not be dramatic. Open the door before the movers think you are crazy. We are family." Mercer pushed past her, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. The facade of the happy family crumbled instantly. "I am done playing games with you, boy," Mercer barked. "Take off that chain right now. You owe us this house." I looked at him. I did not blink. I reached up and slid the metal chain out of its groove. I pulled the heavy door completely open. Blaine sneered, taking a triumphant step forward. But his foot never touched the threshold. His smug expression vanished, entirely drained of color. He physically stumbled backward, nearly falling off the porch. Standing immediately behind my shoulders, stepping out of the shadows of the hallway, were Deputy Grady and a second, heavily armed officer from the county sheriff's department. They rested their hands casually on their utility belts. The silence that descended upon the porch was absolute. "What is this?" Blaine stammered, his voice cracking like a frightened child. "The welcome you earned," I replied. Deputy Grady stepped forward, forming an impenetrable wall between my property and my abusers. "Step back from the door," the deputy commanded. Mercer was a man who refused to ever lose control. He quickly adjusted his jacket, attempting to project dominance over the armed officers. "Officers, this is a ridiculous misunderstanding. My son is having a mental episode. We have a legal right to occupy this estate. I have the signed documentation right here." Mercer reached into his coat and pulled out a thick, folded document. He held it out with supreme confidence. "This is a 10-year residential lease, granting my family full rights to this property. Signed by Harlan himself." Thea stepped out from the living room, her high heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. She took the document from the deputy's hand. She scanned the pages with the precision of a predator locking onto its prey. Thea did not just look at the forged signature. She flipped directly to the final page. She tapped her manicured finger against the official ink stamp at the bottom. "Notice the notary's stamp, Deputy," Thea stated, her voice cutting through the crisp air like a razor. "The commission expiration date listed on this physical stamp is from 2 years ago. This is not a clerical error. This is a deliberate, premeditated felony forgery." Mercer's absolute confidence shattered into a million irreparable pieces. His jaw dropped. He had been so incredibly arrogant, so entirely sure of his own intelligence, that he had used an expired notary stamp he found in his garage to execute a massive real estate fraud. Furthermore, Thea continued, raising her voice so the movers could hear every single word, "This forged document is directly tied to a fraudulent business entity registered at this address. The suspect, Blaine, has currently stolen $85,000 in vacation deposits and attempted to secure a $250,000 commercial loan using my client's stolen identity. This is a conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It falls under federal jurisdiction." The words struck them like physical blows. The legal vocabulary completely paralyzed them. Felony, forgery, wire fraud, conspiracy, federal jurisdiction. Blaine turned to Mercer, his eyes wide with sheer terror. "You said the paperwork was foolproof," Blaine hissed. "Shut your mouth," Mercer roared, his mask of control utterly destroyed. Sybil dropped the pie. The glass dish shattered on the stone porch, scattering fruit and crust across my pristine property. She collapsed against the wooden railing, sobbing hysterically. "Harlan, please. We are your parents. You cannot do this to us. We gave you life." I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up the black folder. I carried it to the doorway. I opened it, revealing the highlighted pages of bank statements. $60,000 to save Blaine from loan sharks. I read, my voice echoing like a judge reading a final sentence. $40,000 to save Mercer's failing contracting business. Over $100,000 in mortgage payments, car insurance, and luxury vacations for Sybil. The grand total is exactly $200,000. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the emergency family credit card that I had paid off every month for a decade. I took a pair of heavy scissors and cut the plastic directly in half. I let the pieces fall onto the shattered pie. "I bought you out," I stated, staring directly into Mercer's terrified eyes. "I paid my ransom. I owe you absolutely nothing. Get off my land." Deputy Grady unclipped his handcuffs. "You have exactly 1 minute to get back in your vehicles and leave this jurisdiction, or you will all be placed under arrest for felony trespassing and presenting forged legal instruments to a sworn officer." They did not hesitate. The cowards turned and fled. Blaine practically sprinted to the SUV. Mercer dragged Sybil by her arm. The moving truck reversed out of the driveway, so fast it tore deep trenches into the gravel. That afternoon, Mercer attempted to spin a narrative of victimhood, calling every extended family member to claim I had lost my mind and threatened them with a gun. He did not know I had already drafted a mass email. I sent a single message to the entire family tree. I attached the forged lease, the expired notary stamp, the state LLC registration, and the massive commercial loan application. The responses were immediate. But the most devastating call came from my Aunt Hattie. She called me weeping uncontrollably. After seeing my email, she confessed that Mercer and Blaine had convinced her to invest her entire life savings into their new mountain resort business. They had stolen $70,000 from an elderly woman. He put himself in jail the moment he stole your future, Hattie, I told her firmly. Call the police. Call the federal authorities. The walls were closing in on them entirely. The predators were finally cornered. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my phone emitted a piercing security alarm. I opened the camera feed. The night vision footage showed Mercer creeping up to my secondary access gate. He was wearing a dark hoodie, carrying a massive pair of industrial bolt cutters. He intended to cut the locks and sever the main electrical lines to my lodge. It was an act of pure, desperate vengeance. I immediately dialed the sheriff's department. I stood on my balcony and watched the red and blue lights completely flood the forest. 2 cruisers fishtailed into the dirt road. The deputies drew their weapons. Drop the tool. Get on the ground. Do it now, the officers commanded. Mercer dropped the heavy metal cutters. He fell to his knees in the dirt. I walked down to the edge of the property and flipped on the massive exterior floodlights. I stood in the blinding light, perfectly still, as I watched the deputies lock the steel handcuffs around my father's wrists. He looked up at me from the back of the police cruiser. He was entirely broken. 6 months later, I am sitting on the deck of my magnificent mountain lodge, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise over the frozen lake. The silence is profound. The peace is absolute. While I am building a highly successful independent consulting firm from my home office, they are reaping the catastrophic consequences of their greed. The federal investigation entirely dismantled them. The bank foreclosed on my parents' home. They were forced to move into a tiny, dilapidated apartment on the dangerous side of the city. Aunt Hattie's aggressive civil lawsuit bankrupted Blaine completely. The undisputed golden child now works the graveyard shift at a sanitation facility, scrubbing floors to pay off his court-ordered restitution. Yesterday, the mail carrier delivered a small, unmarked cardboard box. Inside was a rusty set of keys. They belonged to the old pickup truck Mercer had stolen from me 17 years ago. There was a desperate, pleading note from Sybil, begging for financial help, claiming the keys proved they always loved me. I did not call them. I took the rusty keys and placed them on the stone mantel above my roaring fireplace. I keep them there as a permanent monument to my own survival. I have acquired a peace that absolutely none of their stolen money or toxic manipulation could ever buy. Forgiveness is something you do internally to release your own anger. It does not require granting access to the people who harmed you. Was I too harsh to let my own parents and brother fall into total financial ruin when I could have easily saved them? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I am curious where you draw the line between family loyalty and self-preservation. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment with the name of the city you are living in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much.